Welcome, everyone, to the STOA Embodiment Hour with Schuyler Brown. So for those of you who are familiar with the STOA, I imagine you know who Schuyler is, a good friend of the STOA, part of the art of emergence, and amongst many things, she's an embodiment coach. And Schuyler reached out to me and suggested having some kind of embodiment hour session at the STOA, which might be something that gets integrated in the wisdom gym, and basically just an hour each week to be embodied together. And I recall something in the beginning of what we did at the STOA, where we used to watch like videos and commercials, and then we kind of like felt into it and commented how it reacted to our bodies. So I suggested this to Schuyler, like perhaps there could be a prompt, watching a video, reading an article, maybe even looking at a tweet that does something to our body and using it as an opportunity to practice being embodied. So this is an experiment, the first of its kind, perhaps, and I'm very excited for Schuyler to be leading it. So we're here for an hour. I'm going to take Schuyler in a moment, and we'll begin. We're recording at least the first portion because there's going to be a presentation piece, but we might stop the recording if it feels right. So that being said, everyone feel free to have their camera on. And Schuyler, welcome back to the STOA.
Thanks, Peter. It's so good to be here. And yeah, I feel giddy with excitement about this embodiment hour. It's like I've been playing a game on the playground or something, and now a bunch of people want to play along, and feels so good. And I just love this. Like it really, I have done sessions on embodiment here at the STOA, and I'm coaching people one-on-one. And when in the before times was doing a lot of group work live. But there's something so perfect about what Peter and I kind of landed on here, I think, where this idea of bringing in a piece of cultural stimulus or like a provocation, I'm going to call it. So something that will provoke a response in the body, even if that response is numbness. I mean, this is one of the things we're going to check into and check out in ourselves. But I just love this format. I mean, we'll see. This is the first time we're doing it. Maybe I think I love the format in theory. Let's see how it goes in practice. And so when we were talking about how this could go, and we landed on this idea of bringing in a provocation, one of the first things we thought about was articles, like this. There's so much information right now about what's happening, where things are going, commentary on what's happening, where things are going. And so we thought, well, maybe we could bring in a Consilience Project article or a Rebel Wisdom article or something Peter has written. Like maybe we'll look at, an article like sort of about the meta crisis or something very topical to this community. And that feels great and exciting. And I do want to do that at some point, and I think we'll get there. But the piece of provocation, or the cultural piece that I have for you today, is from a movie. And so, and it's a topical movie. It's the movie Don't Look Up. So if you've seen it, great. If you haven't seen it, I chose a scene that won't spoil it if you want to see it. But I think it's a great place to start. I watched the movie this week. Charles Eisenstein wrote a beautiful essay about the movie this week. Bonita Roy, I was in high-pitched conversation with her this week, and she mentioned it. And so there's something, it's also been wildly popular, I think, even exceeding expectations in Hollywood. So, and it seemed, I guess, final point, it seems to be crossing the aisle, is what I'm hearing. And so, yeah, so that's the piece of stimulus we'll work with today. And what we're envisioning and what I can see is this like an amazing time down the road where any of you could offer or suggest a piece of stimuli, like maybe something hits you funny, midweek. You know, it could be an email, could be a correspondence with, you know, it could be anything, like Peter said, a tweet. And, you know, the point here, and if you're here, you probably already understand the point, so I don't have to belabor it, but I think it's worth saying that, that, well, for me, this is the layer of communication that is, I would say, poorly understood, especially in the media or in public discourse, or even in personal relationships. Like, really, let's be honest, like, you know, there is so much happening when people, when bodies are in space, when we are sharing, when we are receiving, listening, whether we're with a piece of content or with another human being or with a group of people, like already in this space, there's a lot happening as we sort of settle in to this hour, to whatever's going to happen. I mean, we can even just notice now that there's a way we're probably trying to attune or align to what it is I'm saying to each other, to our own image on the screen. That one's always like, takes me a little, and I can feel myself working through these layers of experience. And so I will, in a second, share some principles of embodiment that I'm proposing we explore today. And then if we choose to move forward and continue to do this every week, these would sort of be some of the principles that we'll practice. And one of the key ones is that there's always a content level of experience and a process level. And so, you know, I think a lot of what's happening right now for us is that we're getting hung up at the content level of what people are saying and ignoring or unaware of so much of the dynamic, you know, so many of the dynamics happening at the process level. And it's just, we'll get stuck. We get stuck in these perpetual, like these feedback loops, these cycles, like stagnation, like a stagnant pool in a pond. We're just going round in circles, you know, until we actually pause, stop, look at what's, as Bonnie says, I love this question, what's actually happening? It's a brilliant question. And so I hope this will be a space where we can really do that. I'll share, I want to go ahead and share the principles. So I'm going to share screen for a minute. I am, as a former business person, really allergic to keynotes, but as I started to think about these principles, I was like, wow, I think it would be helpful for you to see them as I'm talking about them. So share screen. Actually, I'm gonna have to find it. Hold on one sec. Okay. So just 2 slides here. So this will just be a sec. All right. So wait, one thing is happening. I hate it when it does this. Great. All right. So yeah, the first one is maintaining a strong connection to inner awareness. So, so this is just something that we'll practice today, and we'll practice in the embodiment hour. I need to be able to see you. I feel disembodied when I can't see you. All right, I can see at least a few of you. Yeah. So, I mean, I know some of you already. I can see some familiar faces, and I know that you have practices, whether it's collective presencing with Ria or all kinds of authentic relating or transparent communication, or just years and years of experience as a present sentient being. Some of these will seem obvious, but I think it's worth sort of stating them as principles we can practice, because I know that I can always use practice on these. So one is maintaining an inner awareness. So it's very easy, especially while we're taking in external stimuli, to lose that connection to my own inner landscape. Like I'm listening to you, especially when things get heated, especially when things start to speed up or someone's irritated or agitated, like if there's a threat. So our hypervigilance, so many of us, about the external keeps us from being able to feel internally what's happening. So the gold standard, for me, the goal is always, if I'm in conversation, I'm constantly trying not to lose myself. So and it can look, it's very awkward at first. It's just like, I'm checking in. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I was just so lost in what Peter was saying. I have no idea what's going on for me. And this only gets, you can see like this gets a little bit dangerous when stakes are high, when things get heated. Another one is when we're talking. So in this space, after we watch the provocation, the clip, we're going to have some space to really unpack or talk about like what the experience was for you. It is my experience a lot of times that people, we haven't practiced speaking and maintaining an inner awareness. So if this is something you practice a lot, then and I do, it's very tricky. If this is something you've never done before, it will be extremely difficult. And as a facilitator, I'm gonna try to keep us, like, really, this is a practice space more than anything. We're not trying to figure anything out for this hour. We're just trying to be embodied. So I may stop you and ask you to feel, or just inquire about what's going on for you as you're speaking. I'll ask the group to watch what's happening for them internally as someone else is speaking. And then ultimately, this just really helps with what's mine and what's yours. So if someone's speaking, you might notice that it triggers a process in you. You know, maybe Peter's speaking about how the clip made him really angry, or he felt anxious or whatever it was, and suddenly you feel anxious. It's like, so one of the great gifts of embodiment is you begin to really have a sense for what is yours and what you're experiencing empathically from somebody else. I already said this about the content level of experience versus the process level. So it's there's what we're talking about, and you'll see this clip is a great example of this. They're talking about something, but there's so much process level going on in the clip. So noticing, naming, and not reacting. So emotions, which are like my, I don't know, playground, again, is the metaphor that's coming up. It's just where I really like to be. Are just so wild. Like they come and go so quickly. They are not rational. They don't make sense. They have a wisdom of their own, a very, very deep wisdom. So one of the practices in this space will be just to notice when we can, to name that emotion, and then not to get attached to it, or to eventually try not to be reactive. Peter was telling me before the session that that's one thing embodiment is helping him with. I hope it's okay I say this, Peter, right? Yeah, is just not being so reactive, like noticing when the trigger happens, noticing when we get tight or contracted or scared or sad or whatever. So trusting the wisdom of the emotions. They're all sensation. They will move. They will change if we allow them. There is something that, I use the term secondary emotions, and we'll see if we get there, but this is great and very interesting to start to name and notice in yourself, where you can be dead sure you are angry about something. Could be something that the politicians are doing, could be something that, a reaction to a piece of propaganda or a piece of news, like whatever. it is, you're like, it makes me so angry. I mean, climate is, this happens a lot. There's a lot of anger and outrage. And sometimes what this is masking is a lot of grief or fear, or a feeling of overwhelm or being out of control. So this is, ultimately another thing that would be really great to play with. It's like we can voice our emotions and then we can get really curious about what else is going on, or what's going on under there, under the surface. Sorry, got an insect visitor, little stink bug. Resistance is what causes stagnation. Numbness is a feeling. So there will be times maybe when I ask you what you're feeling, or, oh, wow, yeah, that's really interesting. How did you feel when they said that, or when this happened? If you look and you feel nothing, that's possible. But a lot of times that's just numbness or dissociation or being disconnected. And there's sometimes that's where we go to reduce the experience. And so you'll see in this clip also, it's a meeting that we're going to be watching. And many of us have been in meetings, right? And there's a lot of numbness. There's a lot of talking over a lot of numbness. We're not really registering what's happening. A few more: be aware of interpretation, opinions, and preferences. So I'll definitely be watching that, and would ask that, we all watch for that. It's like, what do you feel? And this happens for me all the time when I'm working with people one-on-one. It's like, what do you feel? Well, I feel like she was wrong about that, or I feel like he was being an asshole, or I feel like I was doing my best. Like, I feel like it's like, wait, no. Those aren't feelings. Those are already interpretations. Those, as soon as someone says, I feel like, fill in the blank, I'm usually very suspicious about what's going to come next. So the better way for me, if we're going to be really learning and working with the emotions, is like finding some intimacy with them, is to be very specific and clear about, or really try to identify what the emotion is. And then meaning sometimes arises out of that. And sometimes the meaning's surprising if we don't jump straight to interpretation. Interpretation is also a way we jump out of the body into the head, because it doesn't feel good in the body a lot of times. The body, there's a lot going on there, and a lot of it can be unpleasant. So we interpret in order to not be in the body, not feel. And then we're complex. So I think it'll be fun in this space where the stakes are very low. At least right now. I mean, maybe if we brought in a more provocative piece of content, it could feel like the stakes are higher. But you can be holding all kinds of conflicting and paradoxical emotions. It doesn't make sense. Some know your familiar turf. So over time, like, know which emotions you sort of default to. Like grief and sadness are very easy for me to access. They're very familiar. I don't like them, but they're very familiar for me. Whereas this surprised me when I began to see it in the people I was working with, that sometimes positive emotions are just as hard as the negative ones. So depending on your conditioning, your upbringing, your constitution, who knows, your astrology, whatever the reasons for it. For some people, experiencing extreme joy is really intense, or ecstasy, or desire. And some of this is because we've been conditioned out of it, because it wasn't appropriate in some places, right? Like school or work. And God forbid, like in the era of Me Too, that you actually feel desire at work. Now we definitely do all the time. I mean, I've sat in those meetings, where no one's talking about it, but the dynamics are impacted or affected by what's going on, in terms of like very, desire. I mean, emotions that we would really wish weren't present, but they are. And so I would love for this to be a space ultimately, and obviously this takes trust, and this might happen and unfold over time, where you could read something like really intense and hard to handle and feel safe to say, I feel nothing. Or, you know, I have to say, like, there's some Schadenfreude or something, like I actually feel some kind of joy. I don't know, I'm trying to make up an example, but you know, like some really interesting stuff comes through when you begin to create a community and a culture where there's no right or wrong around the emotions. And that's as much on the experiencer as the receivers, us in the room. So this unconditional love, the space of acceptance, is really ultimately such an important part of really being embodied as a culture. And finally, just noticing when you're triggered or you're contracted. And this is something I continue to work on. I think all of us, I mean, it happened to me recently that something happened, and I was certain I was in an argument, and I was certain I wasn't triggered. And then, of course, like 6 hours later, 8 hours later, I cooled down, and I was like, oh my God. There it was. I mean, I was even checking and telling myself I wasn't triggered. So it's just, we need each other to hold us accountable. You know, we gotta do this together. So that's it for the principles, and I can pause. Yeah, anybody have any questions at this point?
Yeah, can you speak to the stagnation and resistance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it's really, really hard to really feel, to completely and fully feel some emotions. And some are so intense, as we all know, because we've been through them, that you need help feeling them. Like it could be grief, for example, is a good one to talk about, because we really need others. We need other nervous systems to help us co-regulate. We need the support and love of community. We need the compassion. We need each other to do certain emotions fully. And so because we can't completely feel or let go, or there's some resistance in us to feeling, which is a perfectly, like, it's an appropriate response in many cases, like it's like a safety valve, but that resistance will keep us from actually excavating, allowing it to move, getting to the root of the issue. I mean, that's why somatic experience, like somatic practitioners, why trauma therapy is so important and such a big thing, is that we really sometimes need to be held as we're experiencing those emotions. I'm not sure if that answered your question. There's a lot more I could say. What was behind the question?
Oh, someone had asked in the chat, and I noticed that it was kind of it was it could have, I needed some enhancement of that. So
yeah, I mean, I guess one other thing I would say, because it's such a familiar experience, I think, for so many of us, is because we've been so bad at feeling emotions for so long, many of us experience something in our own lives. I definitely experienced this, where I never felt safe to feel the depths of despair that were my experience as a young person. And as a result, I spent almost like the decade of my 20s, in a state of depression, which is really it's a stagnation. And so, I think a lot of us fear that if, I know this happens in my coaching all the time, it's like we'll get to a sadness or a feeling of despair or hopelessness, all these feelings that are very present in the culture right now. And the person I'm working with is afraid to go there because it feels like a bottomless pit. It's like, if we actually touch this sadness or this despair, it will never go. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to fall into the pit. And so you can feel how that's holding yourself up. You're kind of holding yourself and not really sinking into the feeling. And I just, one more time, there are very good reasons for not fully feeling feelings. So respecting that, but that's what happens. Yeah.
Brendan, you have your hand up.
Hi. Okay, so I was noticing while you were talking about the resistance, Schuyler, that I was having some resistance to the idea of resistance as stagnation. And I think that where it's coming from for me is that I have this belief that all emotions are a portal to help us get to something that's beneath, and that resistance is just another one of those, and that feeling resistance is an opportunity to understand where the resistance coming from, where it is. And I guess when I hear that resistance is a form of stagnation, I guess for me that makes me feel like there's some kind of hierarchy that that resistance is meant to get to other things that are better than resistance.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I mean, this is one of my allergies to keynote. It's the reduction of things like that. I apologize. I agree with you. I love what you said, because I feel that, like, exactly. You said something like, it's Rebecca, right? Yeah. So, Rebecca, when you said, I feel the resistance, that, yes, like sometimes that's the best we can do. Like sometimes it's that. But I guess when I was calling it, the potential for stagnation is there when we're not even feeling the resistance. And maybe stagnation is a bad word because it has some kind of a judgment. I called it, a stagnant pool isn't a great thing. So yeah, so there's a lot more nuance there. Thank you. Yes.
I had my hand up, but I'm also feeling an embodied sensitivity to the time and then the actual video and watch, so I could forgo it if.
Yeah, maybe because maybe if these are questions of clarification on the principles, like those were great. Let's do those now, and then maybe also we can answer after we've watched the clip and we start to get into the process. Some questions might be answered. But yeah, I'm happy to take a couple. It looks like there are two more.
Just to kind of clarify, am I audible?
Yeah.
This is kind of like a somatic exercise. Is that the right way to think about it, or is that a corollary?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea that you are being conscious. You're alternating states of being conscious in a higher in your mind, just to go out and feel your body.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go out to your body and that data comes back. So this kind of, for me, it goes back to like the 3 guineas for yoga, that it's constant alternating current. And I think that kind of goes back to Rebecca's question, that there's always a state of non-activity in any cycle. It doesn't require resistance to be non-moving or to be out of flow. It can still be at like just a 0 point. So I just think that the process of somatic searching activities is kind of the answer to her question. Like what we're about to do is the difference between resistance and flow, to where there's naturally states of just going between your brain into your body and back to your brain, and constantly feeling while you're also listening to whatever clip we're about to watch, and going back into your body and coming back out. So it's a great exercise. Super excited.
Awesome. I mean, one thing I would This question, and we don't have to answer it now. I think this is something we could explore over time in this group. This is an ongoing, I don't have the answers. We are doing this together. For me, the mind, like there is, and we'll do a very short, like 2-minute sit of like, just to go inside and see what's happening for each of us before we watch the clip. But there is a difference in a way. I understand what you're saying about going out, leaving the mind and going into the body. But if we remember the one thing, right? And then there is a way that we can infuse awareness in the body, rather than processing what seems to be happening in the body, in the mind. So I'm just, watching that jump, because that's what keeps us like thinking that, like stratifying things that way can also just keep us in the head. So yeah, thanks for the nods. I'm going to take that as
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
I love a nod. Brandon, did you have something? Okay, great. All right, so let's just sit. We're going to orient ourselves. Probably this, I don't know, this could be an interesting experience if you haven't centered yourself or done a pretty, a relatively thorough inner awareness, subtle awareness check before watching a Hollywood blockbuster. We're already in the experiment. Let's give it a shot. So just sit comfortably. You can keep your eyes open or you can close them, whatever will help you to take your awareness inside or bring the focus inside. And then let's just start with a snapshot. Just notice what's alive for you, what's awake, what's streaming, what's moving in the body. You might notice the breath, you might notice the heartbeat. You might notice areas of relaxation or areas of tension. And let's just see if we can inhabit a little bit more of our body with our awareness. So just play with bringing your awareness down into your toes, the feet. You can feel awareness moving into your calves, your thighs, your seat. You can feel it sitting grounded. And as soon as you really feel that ground, see if you can drop a little bit deeper in. Maybe feel your belly. Your solar plexus, your heart. Your shoulders, neck. And then dropping any tension or holding behind the eyes or between the eyes. Let's just see if there is any emotional content or a particular flavor. Could be how you're feeling today, could be residue from a conversation. It could be pretty clear. And also notice mental activity. I'm not trying to change it. We're just noticing, is it busy? Is it quiet? And one final scan to release any holding or tensing. And you can slowly open your eyes and notice the space. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to play the clip. It is 2 minutes, I think. It's on YouTube, so if we get a little banner ad, I apologize. How many of you have seen the film? Okay. So this scene is early in the film, about 10 minutes in, and the scientists have discovered a comet is approaching the Earth and it's going to destroy the planet. And so they've gotten an audience with the president and they're sharing this information with the president. Now, the first time I watched this movie or tried, I turned the movie off after the scene because I was so anxious. But I went back to it. But I would just ask as you're taking it in that, you know, we're not watching the movie right now. This is a piece of provocation. And so just notice your inner awareness, outer awareness, everything we just went through, and see how the experience of this scene is for you. Okay, let's see. Great. Yeah. So we can just start with any, like just noticing. That was juicy. I mean, there's already just like you maybe want to start by noticing that there's a lot going on. I mean, there is in me, there's, well, I'll let someone else share their experience. Anybody who wants to kind of unpack what's going on for you. Nothing wrong, nothing right, just an exploration.
For me, there's like so much like constriction in my body, and it was just like increasing. It was like I was getting wrapped up, and it was getting tighter and tighter. Um, and then when I was like feeling into the president, and you could just feel the priority, like and then the guy who was like being more status conscious about this is just, and there's just when you feel into that, it was just restricting more and more. Yeah.
I noticed, Schuyler, something that was exciting. When the clip stopped and I had time to check in, because there was so much going on, my eyes started to water and I felt sad.
Yeah.
I have a very familiar feeling.
Wait, John, can I pause you for 1 sec?
Yeah.
David, I'm curious if there was any, you said it surprised you, the sadness? Is there anything more you want to share about that?
Well, the question the president asked the scientist, you have 20 minutes? Your question, do you have 20 minutes? Okay, I'll be intimate. Going into the sit, I saw a pattern, a default pattern, emotional default pattern came up for me that has lightened up in the last few years. And that pattern was to go to melancholy. And when you mentioned your 20s, I went back to memory in my life where that melancholy was more intense in my 20s.
Mm.
And what I did in those days was I took the strongest drugs I could take to escape from that. So the power of that recognition as we were sitting here kind of filtered through that experience with the clip.
Mm. Mm.
And that's what was surprising when it ended, when I went back to, some sadness, but with a little smile, kind of, that I recognized it. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't even remember your question, but thanks for listening.
Mm. Yeah, I want to give people some space. I have some thoughts on what you've just shared. John, did we want to come back to you?
Yeah, sure. Definitely thanks to David for sharing just now that. Yeah, I have a very, like I said, a very familiar feeling. But I don't know exactly how. It's an extremely familiar feeling, but it's not. It's strange because I don't have a name for it. I definitely feel nervous.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, nervous is probably the most prominent feeling. Tightness in the chest. I mean, it's a familiar feeling because I think I might be the only one in this. I don't know that for sure, but I might be the only one in this room that didn't love the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a lot of enemy. There's it's like us versus this enemy, this obvious enemy. These and enemies just, they're idiots, and they're so clearly stupid and don't realize the obvious. And then the people who are telling the enemy, they're like the good guys, and they're blameless.
Right.
This kind of nonsensical binary. This kind of, we really get off on identifying an enemy. And
so can we pause? This is really great what you're bringing up. So if you, as you're sharing this, can you describe a little bit what you're feeling? Nervousness was really, that nervousness I felt there for a sec, but just curious, it feels like it's shifting now. to something else?
It's I'm anxious. I'm anxious because like I don't like being I don't like being
Pause.
the oddball out. Huh?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, I was gonna have you pause because we were going into that. I'm anxious because don't like to be the oddball out.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Are you comfortable if we go a little bit deeper? You can
Sure.
say no. Okay. Yeah, as I was listening to you, what I felt was yeah, some kind of I'm just gonna call it pain. It's like a pain at the way things are, like it's like a frustration, but it actually hurts more than that. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that feels like I feel that, and I'm like, yeah, it softens me a lot.
Mm.
How do you feel if we identify that?
I feel a little vulnerable for sure,
Okay.
but yeah, that resonates very deeply actually, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Okay, we can leave it there. I'll just describe what happens for me, because in the culture right now, there is a lot of the us versus them, right? And it's really easy to feel that anxiety or nervousness around that. When we go even one level deeper and we start to feel the pain, almost like, why is it like, why would we do that to people? When we start to get into that, ooh, the whole thing softens a lot. So thank you for offering that. That's exactly what I'm hoping we can, these kinds of alchemical, it's like the alchemy that the emotions present for us. It's like, how do we transform this? Thank you.
Thank you for putting words on something that actually, it's still very challenging for me to, because this is maybe the oldest feeling that
Oh,
it's a very familiar feeling for me. So I appreciate that.
I think you're not alone. I wonder if anyone else can identify with that feeling of hurt. Yeah. And it's like Thomas Hubel, who I really love, who's one of my teachers. He says precision is love. And there is something when we start to get very precise about the feelings, you feel felt, or I know I do. It's like, yeah. So thank you for letting us go there a little bit. Okay, Brandon, you want to share? Rebecca.
So I noticed a lot of similar feelings coming up. While I was watching, I was feeling stress and agitation and also some silliness. But on top of all of it, I was noticing that I was really holding myself through that, and that in some ways I didn't feel like I was totally connecting with it, because I kept reminding myself, this isn't happening to me. This is a movie. And that allowed me to have some distance from the intensity of what was going on, which I felt like I needed in order to like feel safe watching.
Yeah, amazing. That's such a, I'm not as good about that. This isn't happening part. My nervous system, like sometimes, especially with movies, will think it's happening. That's why I had to turn it off the first time I watched it. And then I had to like go away and say, okay, it's a movie. We're going to turn it on. It's on Netflix. But yeah, that's beautiful. I wonder, Rebecca, was it useful to you to notice how you were holding yourself through the experience?
I actually feel like there's a little bit of grief about it for me, because or self-consciousness that I can't allow myself to feel those things, because I know that in some ways this isn't just a movie, that this is also real and it's a reflection of what's happening in the world. And so I feel a little bit self-conscious or some grief that like I'm not allowing myself to feel that stuff.
I just want to understand. So feel the intensity of the reality, if that, to like, you feel a little dissociated from that's my word, not yours. What's happening? Like not, I'm just, yeah, there's something here that I want to understand.
I think the story I have about it is that if I can't allow myself to fully feel what's happening in this movie, then that means that I can't allow myself to fully feel what's happening in my reality and the world.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so, okay, y'all you're gonna witness. This is my experience. The way I process things is to feel. I'm feeling, and I just felt that what you did there was so beautiful, Rebecca, as a model, to frame it as the story I have is that, you know, whatever the story was. I love that, because that allows us to process it. It's like, right. And it gives it enough space that it could be a lot of different, like you're open to it being something else. The story I have is that it's hard for me to process these things. I mean, this is one of the reasons I chose this clip, and one of the reasons I think the movie is potent. Well, not just me, but the movie is potent because this is the issue, is that it's really hard for us to feel the intensity, the enormity, of this crisis. And what bothers me, I'm gonna just take it into my experience, and why I think Peter and I wanted to convene this kind of an event, is that so much of the writing, so much of the news, so much of the conversation about climate, let's say, is not being, it's like coming from a place where it's not being felt. It's hard to receive and totally feel. Yeah. It's like how different it would be to read the news and really feel, or to read these scientific reports or reports from COP26, for example, the climate talks. Like it was like the media was having a glee fest about how it was all failing. Meanwhile, below the surface of that, sensitive people were like, holy fuck. Kind of like Leonardo's character or whatever, or, you know, if you watch the whole movie, you'll see Jennifer Lawrence also like just completely flipped out, because it's like, hello, that numbness, but there's like this blanket of numbness that and some of it's, yeah, I feel it all the time too. I'm constantly questioning that, like, how much can I feel of what's going on? How much is it my job to feel everything? Just riffing on what you shared there, Rebecca. I wonder if you have anything to say. Is there anything you want to share as a follow-up?
Yeah, that brought up a lot for me, specifically because my dad is an environmental journalist and he reports exclusively on climate change. And he also really has trouble feeling feelings. And so just right now, like that had never quite connected for me. And now I'm just really curious to talk to him about that.
Oof. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really believe that we can, when we start to investigate we've only had 20 minutes or half an hour here. I hope in the future we'll have more time. Like what I'd like to do is just be regular, where we come into the session, we have the piece of provocation, and then we spend the majority of the time doing this, feeling and unearthing, because I think we're going to learn a lot about why we're in this fix that we're in. Oh, I know we're at time. I didn't hear, do you want to say just something, person with your hand up? I can't see your name. Oh, two people with hands up. I'm sorry.
Read.
Peter, how do we?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay to stay for another minute if yeah, a couple minutes.
Yeah, read.
I can just share very quickly. I had this feeling of sadness watching that scene, but also this strange feeling of catharsis, like some release, like some sort of sense of liberation. Like, yes, like I'm happy that this is being seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I just feel like when you say that, when you know, it's like also the precision of your description of what your experience was. I could feel catharsis. I felt, and I wonder if anyone else, could you feel there was, as we track what Reed's experience is, I feel it in my body. So that's the other thing I would just say is we're an organism. We can help, we can feel together. And I was needing a little bit of that release, like a little of that catharsis. So thank you for offering that. If we had more time, I would love to know, I would like to get into what the relief, because catharsis is a great, beautiful word, but what was the valve? Like what actually released? Maybe an inquiry for you.
I think it's difficult for me to express in feeling words. I used to work in science communication, so I'm very familiar with information that is important and truthful, not landing. Like the experience of important information meeting these kinds of dynamics is very familiar to me. And this is like the best piece of art that I've ever seen really capture that, and also kind of transmute it with humor so that kind of makes it not so dark. And I just thought it was beautiful. Yeah.
So you've seen the whole movie?
Yes.
Okay, so some of your catharsis could be like a little bit related to the entirety of the.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, there's a big arc. There's a narrative arc that, yeah, I love the end. Okay, one more and then.
Is that me?
Mhm.
Yeah, I just I haven't seen the movie, so it was the first time I saw something of it. I just had feelings of like being amused and curious, and also some irritation. I was seeing it entirely on the level of theatre, of screenplay, of like the camera angles, like a very deliberate attempt to portray a president in a particular way, referring to maybe someone else. And that brought up feelings of irritation because I was maybe needing more. Yeah, there was a feel. It's not a feeling, but there was my interpretation was like, I'm being conned here. Someone wants to get a rise out of me. Someone's aiming for a particular reaction, and I'm seeing through that. So maybe, yeah, I think my feelings of it was just amusing as a theatrical performance, and yeah, that kind of irritation. And it wasn't a deep feeling. It was just like, oh yeah, Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, irritation is a really great starting place because there's grist, right? There's something that's rubbing, and you've just given Helen some reasons for that, and they sounded very convincing, and I have no reason not to believe you. but I would like, this is like that kind of like irritation is it's just a nice entryway usually into something else, or something. And it could just be that, exactly what you just said, could just be. I'm trying to feel as we feel. I also felt some amusement at the scene this time. I mean, they're playing it really. I mean, it's funny. Meryl Streep is brilliant, or I think so. But watching that, I guess I will just say that that was another thing, obviously, that as news becomes performance, and as the lines really blur between propaganda, entertainment, performance, facts, science, just being able to know, like, I feel really irritated. So I'm being manipulated. Very interesting. That angle provokes this in me. I just wanted to, there's one point, I don't know if you noticed it, where Meryl Streep looks at her boots, where they show the boots. You see Jennifer Lawrence's eyes steely holding the gaze of the president, and then the boots, and then you see Meryl Streep doing the judgment. There is so much, talk about content and process, like under the surface going on there, generationally, woman to woman, like there's so much going on even in that. But you know, the way they've shot it is really to provoke this a particular response. So yeah, so we'll I think we should close it now. I mean, that is one of the disciplines of this embodiment hour, and I was happy to call it embodiment hour so that it was contained for my own discipline. But I hope you've enjoyed. Please feel free to send any feedback to me, to Peter. Would love to do this regularly and bring in pieces of writing or news or culture, whatever feels alive during the week would be really great for us to tackle.
And I think it would be good to post this one on YouTube, but if anyone shared anything that would like to have it edited out, just email me and then I'll edit it out before I post it. I'll post it maybe tomorrow. And yeah, Schuyler and I will talk, and we'll post maybe a 4-part series of Embodiment Hour, and we can go from there. Yeah, so Schuyler, thanks so much. And everyone, thanks so much for coming to the STOA today.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Feel you all.
Thank you.